morning. So yesterday we were traveling down to California. Didn't really find a good 5-minute chunk to be able to do the random word generator. So today, the next day, I'm doing a bit due to today. The random word for today is Earthwax. First off, I don't really know what that is. Second, I don't really have an idea of how to really talk about this word, Earthwax, other than the fact that earth and wax are two different things, and I'm assuming that Earthwax might be something akin to a tree's sap, wax, that kind of stuff. But I do have one story. So yesterday I was listening to Vin Jing, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, the KISS communication expert that I have really fallen in love with in all of his philosophies and frameworks. One of the frameworks is this idea of the 3, 2, 1, coming up with one thing to talk about, 2 different types or forms or ways, and then 3 steps. And I didn't really get the impression that it was talking about all 3 of them in response to something ad hoc like this, something random. But he did use the example that you can just choose one of them, and that usually provides enough of a malleable dynamic framework for you to be able to respond off the cuff. So, Earthwax. If there is one thing that I can get from Earthwax, it's that the word wax, I'm gonna politician this. So the word wax is something that it brings back a lot of memories in my life, especially back to my childhood. My dad is a licensed sculptor. He's a bronze sculptor, and he's the only licensed sculptor for Harley Davidson. So growing up, my dad is always sculpting these like highlights and pivotal moments in motorcycling history, usually attributed to Harley Davidson. And one of the cool things about my dad's profession is he's one of the very few people that knows, understands, and can competently do every step of the lost wax chase process. This is how I'm politicianing it. I'm gonna take this word and then I'm just gonna use it in a way to talk about something else. And so my dad would always be using wax. And there's different kinds of waxes, but he would always use this maroon color, what felt pretty firm and strong type of wax. He was almost like, he would use these pieces as like support, but also in fine tuning and doing like very, very, very fine indentions because the wax was so strong. So he would tie wax and he would do clay together in creating these sculptures before he would cast it and then, build out a mold and then cast it and all this stuff. And there was one thing that I could get out of my dad constantly using wax, was that there is something so important about having a vision of what you want to accomplish, of what you want to do. And in this case, it would be my dad having the idea in mind of what the final product is going to be, what the sculpture is going to look like, what mantle it's going to sit on in someone's house, what kind of emotions he's wanting it to convey to his clients or to his customers. And then not only working backward, but getting into a stage where he's utilizing just the wax. And I love this stage of working with wax because it's a stage where you can constantly refine it and tweak it and then step back and go, this wheel doesn't feel proportionate to the head. This motorcycle feels off scale to the axle, something like that. And he can constantly work with it and then step back, observe it, maybe even step away from it completely and kind of let his mind just wander and absorb maybe other things that he could add to it and let his subconscious kind of work on the problem, and then he can come back to it fresh and begin working, because it's this stage, this wax stage, where it's still able to shape it and refine it and perfect it. And he would use tools, certain tools that he would either have to heat up in the moment to really carve and detail certain parts. And we'll use like the example of the body, right? Because the body, sculpting the human body is one of the most difficult, or drawing or depicting the body is one of the most difficult forms of art, because it's so organic and dynamic, and because the eye can immediately recognize when something's off. Like, oh, this is weird. With their face, you might not be able to articulate it, but the mind can immediately recognize a discrepancy. And so if you can sculpt, or if you can manifest something into reality, whether it's on a two-dimensional plane, like a piece of paper, or a sculptor, like my dad's example, and the human, the viewer can look at it and not discern any kind of problem with it, then you did a good job at depicting the human body. Okay, so the point is my dad would have certain tools, and these tools he would use to carve out like lines in the fabric or the clay and the wax. He would carve out ever so slightly and then step back and look and go, is this right? Is this not right? Then you'd have to heat up the tool again, or you'd have to use a different tool to kind of refine it, or I carved too much, I'm gonna have to put more wax in on this part. The point I'm trying to make is, I believe that it is us and our humility and our open and receptiveness to being molded and to being changed throughout this entire life is what allows us to remain in the wax stage of this process of the master. You could say God or the universe, or Allah, or karma, or whatever, to come in and to constantly shape us and refine us. And it's not about age. It's not about position or status. I don't even believe it's about even like location or religion. I think it has to do with how open and receptive and warm are you to having some outside influence. You could say a transcendent, more highly elevated, higher order influence come in and better shape you, like my dad did when it came to sculpting motorcycles. And that you could be 70 years old, 80 years old, 100 years old on your way down to the grave, and still be in a state of, you're in the wax chase process. You're in the wax process, where God can still come in with his tools and shape you and better refine you and tweak you to becoming a perfect specimen. But if pride gets in the way, or humility is vacant, then you've kind of transitioned. The wax and the clay have become cold, and you have transitioned out of this malleable state, and you're into a more difficult state. You're more in a hardened state where you're being casted. You're being molded and you're being casted, and that's a stage where you're not really being shaped anymore. You're not being molded. Good morning. You're not being shaped. You're not being shaped anymore. Kind of like, this is what it is. Take it or leave it. Now we're just gonna what's the word for it? Continue with this stage, and you are what you are. So that is my word for today, Earthwax. And I politicianed it and took it in another way that fit a framework that I understood, using this is the one thing that reminds me of Earthwax. Wax, lost wax chase process. My dad. Okay, let's tie a theme into this. Here it is. So, lost, no. Earthwax? Oh, cool, I got the flag. Earthwax.